Somewhere in almost every conversation about real estate investing, someone uses the phrase commercial real estate as if it means one thing, a single category, a single kind of building, a single kind of tenant, a single kind of risk. It doesn't. And the confusion buried inside that phrase costs people real money because industrial isn't some small subset hiding inside commercial. It's one of several very different worlds that happen to share a legal umbrella, and mistaking one for the other is how a first-time investor ends up underwriting a warehouse deal using assumptions borrowed from an office building, or a downtown storefront, or a shopping plaza, and getting the numbers badly wrong.
So let's actually settle this properly, starting from the top. Here's the first thing to understand, and it resolves half the confusion on its own. Commercial real estate isn't a category of building. It's a legal and financial classification that simply means not residential. That's the entire defining feature. If a property generates income through business activity rather than housing people, it falls under the commercial umbrella. Underneath that umbrella sit several genuinely distinct property types, each with its own tenants, its own leasing conventions, its own risk profile, and its own way of making or losing money. Office buildings, retail centers, multifamily apartment complexes in most classification systems, hospitality properties like hotels, and industrial, the warehouses, distribution centers, and manufacturing facilities this channel focuses on.
Calling something commercial real estate is a little like calling something a vehicle. Technically accurate, almost useless for making a decision. A pickup truck and a sports car and a school bus are all vehicles, and nobody would evaluate them the same way. Office towers and warehouses are both commercial real estate, and evaluating them the same way is exactly how mistakes get made. So let's build the actual distinction, piece by piece, starting with the most basic question you can ask about any building. Who uses it and why?
An office building exists so that people can gather in one place to do knowledge work, meetings, computers, phone calls, collaboration. The tenant is renting space for humans to occupy for 8 or 9 hours a day, and the building's value is almost entirely about how well it supports that human presence. Natural light, elevator speed, air quality, proximity to restaurants and transit for the people who work there. A retail property exists so that customers can physically walk in and buy something or experience a service. The tenant isn't just renting square footage, they're renting foot traffic, visibility, and a location that puts their product in front of the right people at the right moment. A shopping center's value is inseparable from how many cars pass it, how visible its signage is from the road, and how convenient its parking feels to a shopper who could just as easily go somewhere else.
An industrial building exists for neither of those reasons. Nobody is walking in to buy something off a shelf. Nobody is spending their workday sitting at a desk inside it. An industrial building exists to store, move, or transform physical goods, and almost everything about its design, its location, and its value flows directly from that single function. This difference sounds abstract until you actually stand inside each kind of building. So let's do exactly that.
Walk into a Class A office building in a downtown core, and you'll notice floor-to-ceiling glass, a marble-floored lobby, an elevator bank, perhaps a rooftop terrace. The building is designed to impress the people who work there and the clients who visit them. A significant portion of the construction budget goes toward finishes nobody will ever touch, structurally. Lighting fixtures, lobby furniture, architectural glass. Because the building's entire value proposition is about experience.
Walk into a modern distribution warehouse, and you'll notice almost none of that. Bare concrete floors, exposed steel trusses overhead, no lobby to speak of. What you will notice, if you know what to look for, is 36 feet of clear height instead of a 9-foot office ceiling, because that height determines how many levels of racking a tenant can install.
you'll notice a long row of loading dock doors, because truck throughput is the building's entire reason for existing. You'll notice reinforced concrete flooring rated for heavy equipment, because an office floor never has to hold the weight of a forklift stacked 3 pallets high.
Every dollar spent building an industrial facility goes toward function. Height, floor loading capacity, dock ratio, power capacity, truck circulation, because the tenant isn't paying for experience. They're paying for the physical capacity to move product efficiently. Strip away the finishes from an office building and you've damaged its value. Strip away the finishes from a warehouse and you've barely touched its value at all, because the finishes were never where the value lived in the first place.
This structural difference cascades directly into how each property type gets leased, and this is where a lot of first-time investors trip badly, because they assume lease structures work the same way across all commercial property. They don't, not even close. Office leases are frequently structured as full-service or gross leases, where the landlord bundles property taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance into the quoted rent and absorbs the risk of those costs rising over time. A tenant signs a lease knowing roughly what they'll pay monthly, and the landlord carries the exposure if operating costs increase faster than expected.
Retail leases frequently include something called percentage rent, where the tenant pays a base rent plus a percentage of their sales above a certain threshold, meaning the landlord's income is directly tied to how well the retailer's business actually performs, not just to a fixed contractual number.
Industrial leases overwhelmingly favor a completely different structure: triple net, often written as NNN. Under a triple net lease, the tenant pays base rent and directly covers property taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance on top of it. The landlord's income is far more insulated from rising operating costs because those costs simply pass through to the tenant as a matter of contract. This single structural difference is a major reason industrial real estate has become so heavily favored by institutional capital over the past 2 decades. It produces a cleaner, more predictable income stream than an office or retail lease typically can.
Lease length tells a similar story of divergence. Office leases in major markets commonly run 5 to 10 years. Retail leases, particularly for smaller tenants, can run even shorter, sometimes 3 to 5 years, because retail concepts come and go with consumer trends. Industrial leases, especially for large single-tenant distribution facilities, frequently stretch to 7, 10, sometimes 15 years or more, because relocating a major logistics operation is enormously disruptive and expensive for the tenant, which gives industrial landlords a structurally longer, steadier income horizon than most other commercial property types offer.
Now let's talk about the part that actually determines returns, because this is where the practical stakes get real. Vacancy and re-tenanting risk behave completely differently across these categories, and treating them as equivalent is one of the fastest ways to misprice a deal.
An office building losing a major tenant faces a genuinely difficult releasing challenge. Prospective office tenants have highly specific, often idiosyncratic space requirements, certain layouts, certain build-out preferences, sometimes years of lease negotiation before a deal closes. Office vacancy can linger for extended periods, and the tenant improvement costs required to attract a new tenant, custom fitting a space to their exact specifications, can run extraordinarily high, sometimes tens of dollars per square foot or more, before a single dollar of rent is collected.
Retail vacancy risk depends enormously on location quality. A prime, high-visibility retail location with strong foot traffic can release relatively quickly because retailers are constantly hunting for exactly that kind of exposure. A secondary retail location, once vacated, can sit empty for a very long time because there's a limited pool of retailers willing to gamble on weaker foot traffic. Industrial vacancy behaves differently still. A well-specified, well-located distribution warehouse,
good clear height, strong dock ratio, highway access, tends to release relatively efficiently in a healthy market because the pool of potential logistics tenants looking for exactly that kind of space is broad, and the building specifications are far less idiosyncratic than an office tenant's needs. Tenant improvement costs for industrial space are also typically much lower than office, because a logistics tenant mostly needs functional racking and dock access, not custom architectural finishes.
This doesn't mean industrial is risk-free. It absolutely isn't. But the nature of the risk is different. Less about finding any tenant, more about whether the rent a new tenant will pay matches what the prior tenant was paying, particularly if market conditions have shifted. There's another dimension worth understanding, because it explains why institutional capital has increasingly poured into industrial over the past 2 decades specifically, at the expense of other commercial categories. Operating expense volatility.
Office buildings carry meaningfully unpredictable operating costs. Janitorial staff, elevator maintenance, complex HVAC systems serving dense human occupancy, security personnel. These costs rise with inflation and with the sheer complexity of running a building full of people every day. Retail centers carry their own volatility, tied closely to the health of individual tenants and the broader retail sector's exposure to shifting consumer behavior.
Industrial buildings, particularly single-tenant distribution facilities on triple-net leases, carry dramatically simpler operating profiles. Fewer systems, fewer daily human occupants to support, costs that largely pass through to the tenant rather than sitting with the landlord. This operational simplicity is a genuine structural advantage, and it's a major reason cap rates for industrial properties have compressed so significantly relative to their historical relationship with office cap rates.
Now, all of this creates a genuinely interesting question worth sitting with for a moment. If industrial offers longer leases, simpler operations, more predictable income, and a broader tenant pool, why would anyone choose office or retail at all?
The honest answer is that industrial isn't strictly better. It trades one set of advantages for a different set of trade-offs. Office and retail properties, particularly in prime locations, can command rents and valuations that reflect genuine locational scarcity in ways that suburban industrial land often cannot. A trophy office tower in a major downtown core or an irreplaceable retail corner in a dense urban neighborhood carries a kind of value that has very little to do with the building itself and everything to do with a location that can never be replicated. Industrial real estate's advantages are largely operational and structural. Office and retail's advantages, at their best, are largely locational and almost impossible to reproduce.
There's also a growth driver difference worth naming directly. Industrial real estate's demand story over the past 2 decades has been overwhelmingly driven by the rise of e-commerce and the restructuring of global supply chains, a genuinely powerful structural tailwind. Office demand, by contrast, has faced real structural headwinds from the shift toward hybrid and remote work, a shift that emerged sharply in recent years and has meaningfully changed how much physical office space many companies actually need. Retail has spent over a decade adapting to the same e-commerce forces that have benefited industrial, closing some traditional store formats, while others, particularly experience-driven retail, have proven surprisingly resilient.
This is precisely why an investor cannot simply learn commercial real estate as a single discipline and apply it uniformly. The demand drivers, the lease structures, the tenant relationships, the operating cost profiles, and the vacancy dynamics are meaningfully different across office, retail, and industrial. Different enough that expertise in one doesn't automatically transfer to competence in another.
So when someone says they're getting into commercial real estate, the single most useful follow-up question is simply, which kind? Because the honest answer to that question determines almost everything else about how the deal should actually be evaluated. The lease structure to expect,
the tenant pool to model, the vacancy risk to price in, and the operating cost volatility to plan around.
Industrial sits inside the commercial real estate umbrella, but it plays by its own rules, shaped by physical function rather than human experience or foot traffic, tied to supply chains rather than downtown skylines, and increasingly favored by sophisticated capital precisely because its structure, long leases, pass-through expenses, broad tenant demand, produces a kind of durability that other commercial categories, for all their own strengths, simply aren't built to offer in the same way.
This is Trove Estate. Commercial real estate is the umbrella. Industrial is the discipline underneath it. And understanding exactly where one ends and the other begins is the first real step toward evaluating any deal correctly. If this helped clarify something you've wondered about for a while, subscribing to the channel is the best way to support more videos exactly like this one. It costs nothing, and it's how we keep building these out.